Thank you, Walter. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'd like to start by just showing you a little bit about Geodis and why we are in the environmental sector and what we do in the environmental sector. We're actually owned by the French Railway as a French company, and we are providing logistics services for environmental requirements, in particular covering automobiles, electrical products, and batteries. In Europe, we work in a number of member states, in particular through the European Recycling Platform, to whom we provide our services in the waste electronics return and batteries return program. Other clients up there for you include, apart from ERP, Ford, GE, IBM, the Medical Equipment Europe Group, Mercedes, and other automotive companies. So what is driving companies to be environmental? How many of you have heard of the producer responsibility principle? Hooray! So a bit of a novice group to the concept, but the concept has been around for a while now, since 1994. And it started in Europe, and it's been rolled out throughout the European member states through directives. And this European legislation has created some national opportunities in a number of waste streams. And those waste streams that are currently covered by UK legislations, and also other countries, but we'll focus on the UK for now, would be packaging, which has been in place since 1997. End-of-life vehicles came in 2003. Then we have the waste electrical and electronic equipment regulations, which we lovingly refer to as WEEE, and that's how I'll be referring to it, so don't take offense. It's a technical term. And then most recently, that's come in this year, were the batteries regulations. What this legislation does, it obliges producers to set up systems that make sure that all the product is returned at the end of its life and it's disposed of in an environmentally efficient way. The obligation is based around financing those systems, and it is based on the weight that somebody would put on the market. There are some provisions for collections and for information provisions, and the concept can be easily rolled out into other product streams. Geodis also works with companies to return products such as furniture, flooring, and automotive parts. Now, the presentation title was to look at the retail industry in particular, and so I like to focus on why retailers do this, and one of the reasons they do this is because they are also obligated parties. So it's not necessarily those who just produce the product, it's also those that import it. They are classed as producers. So essentially, within packaging, the obligation would be to collect packaging around products, so a Kellogg's cornflake box, just as much as a cardboard box in which wine bottles are distributed in. And the legislation has decided that it would be set up around an existing network. So the network for bringing the product back didn't have to be reinvented. It was already established. It works with existing recycling industry. We is a little bit different. Again, the manufacturers are obliged to take charge of their products. However, the retailers have been asked to fund the return system for the product. So there's been an evolution from placing just the sole obligation onto the manufacturers to including the retailers. Portable batteries, the most recent offering, again, affects manufacturers, but also those who place batteries in, for example, electronic equipment. And again, the retailers are required to take back waste products in stores. And this has been limited to retailers who sell more than 32 kilos of batteries per year. And if you wanted to have a visual idea of how much that is, it's about one packet of AA batteries, so 4 batteries in a pack. If you sell one every day, you'll get to your 32 kilos. There is another concept of end of life, and that's vehicles, but I won't be focusing on that today. So what have retailers done with regards to making the most of packaging? And how have they gone about turning this requirement to comply into something that they can actually work with as a business? Well, essentially, it's all about value recognition and cost minimization. And there are 2 approaches to this, depending on whether you're manufacturing in control of your product, packaging, which is the case with some of the retailers, or whether you're not in control at all. If you are in control of your packaging, there are essentially 3 things you can do. You can either lightweight it, which has happened to, for example, or beverage cans or food cans. There is product substitution, so you might want to choose to substitute a heavy material like glass with a lighter material like plastic, so you don't pay as much for the weight that you put on the market, and you may potentially have a different stream to recycle. Or you simply reuse your packaging. Some of the second-hand retailers have done that. Any product that comes in packaging, the packaging is reused, so they don't pick up an obligation on that at all. If you are not in charge of what packaging you use, there is 2 ways you can deal with this. You can either recognize the value that you get from the waste packaging, or you can offset the cost into your cost of compliance. But essentially, it's about getting the value out of what you previously thought might be a waste stream. And how did retailers do that? Well, essentially, they've looked at how they were operating in stores, and one way to look at it would be to look at the product display. So, for example, packaging hasn't even been brought in to put product on display. Or they consolidate packaging. You probably noticed in your supermarket, the attendants take the bottles out of the boxes, they put them on the shelf, they flat pack the boxes, and they put the boxes onto the cage. And the cage that is used for the outbound logistics is actually quite a useful transport mechanism to return the packaging back into the warehouses, because it's essentially clean packaging. What then happens at warehouse level? The packaging gets segregated into the different recyclable streams, it gets baled, and then it can be recycled by your recycler. You either get a fee or a rebate for the material, or you get the recycling credit that you actually require if you are a retailer who puts product on the market and you're caught out by this legislation. So you essentially have generated a value out of what was previously a waste stream, and it has offset some of your cost of compliance. So that was the driver and the way it's been done in the packaging industry. The packaging returns happens at supermarkets. It also happens at other retail outlets. But with regards to the waste electricals, that's predominantly a electrical retailer that would be affected here. The retail industry in the WE sector is basically obliged to take back the product at the end of the life. So there's 2 ways that they can do this. They can either fund the system, which we call the distributor take-back scheme, with a one-off contribution. The scheme then supports the local authority sites with regards to improving the infrastructure there, making sure the containers are there for the public to bring back waste electronics, make sure the signage is there, and then they provide the shopper, when the shopper buys the new product, the recycling information in the store. Or they can do, as it says on the tin, they can provide in-store take-back. They can also do it both. And the choice that they will make really depends on what kind of product they will be putting on the market. The example I've used here for the electrical retailer is essentially a washing machine. So the outbound chain can be used for the return chain. The customer purchases his washing machine. At the point of sale, it's established whether there is a return required, and it is recorded into the system. When the product is delivered and the appliance set up, the old appliance is taken back. It works very well with a washing machine because chances are you might not like to have two washing machines in your house. It doesn't work so well with perhaps a computer where you might want to hold on to it for a while before you replace it with the new one. When you collect the redundant equipment, there might be an option to ask whether this equipment is good for reuse, in which case you can slap a sticker on it and it'll be easier to segregate when you get to the warehouse. You could also ask whether there are any other electricals. And don't forget, you need the appropriate paperwork because you're dealing with waste to transport this through the system. In the warehouse, you'd be consolidating your returns into streams. Fridges and TVs need to be kept separate, they're hazardous. You may divert for reuse, or you may choose, if you are a business seller, that you might want to have as parts. Product is stored in the designated areas. You need hard flooring for hazardous waste material. And you could also have, depending on volume, a permanent trailer that gets picked up every night, or you might want to operate on collection and request. The important aspect when dealing with waste is that you always must maintain full traceability where you've picked up, what you're doing with it, and where it's going, so that you are able to satisfy the Environment Agency's guidance and audit requirements. Just some quick pictures to show you that there's various ways of dealing with electricals. Large appliances are handboard. You can have ready for collection on pallets, particularly when you're dealing with businesses. And if you don't have a lot of space or do a great volume, then you might want to use the same collection containers for your storage, so you don't have any space wastage. The last stream are batteries, and the obvious choices might not be the right ones here, and that's got to do with the fact that batteries are hazardous materials caught up by the ADR regulations. It might be an obvious choice to perhaps use the postal network or the parcel network because there are small quantities, and surely you should be able to send it through a network very easily. Or you could add it to your packaging that you're sending back and forth from the supermarket, because the supermarkets are obliged to collect in store, and you may have noticed that there are bins in supermarkets now where they have the battery collections. So difficulties here are postal network, because flying certain chemistries containing lithium is not permitted, though one might argue, why are we flying all those mobile phones, which also have batteries in them? And hazardous waste licensing would prevent us from moving back things like televisions or even batteries through the parcel hubs, because each individual hub would have to be licensed. Each individual leg from hub to hub, which can be up to 5 sometimes, would have to be financed, and the node costs between 10 and 15 pounds. So it very quickly makes this a very uneconomic way of collecting batteries, even though it would be tagging onto an existing network, and it would be a very good opportunity for return logistics. And then ADR, Transport of Dangerous Goods Act, also affects batteries in that there has to be training provided, and the van needs to be kitted out in certain ways, and one can't go over a certain limit of batteries with certain chemistries. And in fact, there are many things to consider when dealing with waste. So whilst it might be a straightforward-looking return chain, there are aspects that just need to be brought out. You need a waste transport license to carry anything, unless it's your own. Everything has to be fully consigned, depending on whether it is hazardous or not. Duty of care will always apply to waste. There is a licensing requirement for holding hazardous waste on your premises. There are also waste storage and volume limits and waste handling requirements depending on what volumes you push through the business. In addition, there are things like data security. If you're dealing with returned IT equipment, for example, you must make sure that before you send it out to the rest of the chain, the data is completely wiped. There have been embarrassing incidents in the past. Movement of waste is also an issue because you need to make sure that you always understand where it's gone to. We've had things in the press recently about televisions ending up in Nigeria. And the traceability needs to be had throughout the entire product chain. And by the time you get to the recycling industry, you might be 4, 5, 6 providers down the line. So that makes it a very complex task. You need to make sure all the operators in the chain are licensed. When you get your recycling certificate back, to make sure that you can offset it against your cost of compliance, they need to be valid, so that needs to be checked. And there is an issue around business ethics sometimes. So this is why you need to be in control, because you want to avoid pictures like those. So what I'd like to leave you with is essentially the reverse chain as we operate it at Geodis, where we have a returned product which gets booked in through the web or through the telephone. It is logged in the system. It is labeled, it has a shipping confirmation. The transport is decided, so we make sure that whatever is in place is fit for purpose. Then it's collected, bulked, scanned to make sure that we've got everything in the system that we set out to get and nothing got lost or fallen off the wagon. It is transported to the consolidation points or onward transportation points, then it might be consolidated further, maybe sorted for reuse, part harvested. After the diversification, scanned back in to make sure that we still have all the product before it then goes into the final destination, either reuse or recycling. Which brings me to the end of my presentation, and I'm sorry I've overrun.